everyone. Please put your hands together and give a warm welcome to your host, Pete Bandstra, Program Director for 3D Arts. Pete Guerette, CEO and founder of Beyond FX.
Whatever you want.
Brian Carico, Video and Lighting Director, as well as a Production Manager. Tom, you're next. Tom Boyd, Underwater Cinematographer. Fernando Delgado, Production Sound Mixer for Stickman Sound. Kim Alpert, Artist and Creative Strategist. Go.
Well, thank you everybody for joining us this morning, and thank you for coming out. So we're going to get started. Rates, freelance rates. You're in the industry. How do you know what to ask or how much, and so you're not overselling or putting it too high, or you're undercutting and making yourself at a point where you're too low? This is an ugly time.
I'm excited about this one.
Good. I'm going to let you run.
Yeah, okay, so this is a lecture that I do frequently at schools, because not a lot of people talk about money, right? It's a big faux pas, and if there's ever an audience that we should be talking about money with, it's you guys right now. So when you're trying to figure out your rate, there's really two numbers that you need to start thinking through for your own paradigm. One is the cost basis of your work, and the other is the value basis. The cost basis is how much money do you actually need to cover your bills. If you don't know that, you have nothing going into negotiations. So the very first thing I want you guys to start to think down is how much money do you actually need every month? And that needs to include taxes, sick days, vacation days, your safety buffer, your hardware, your software, like all these other things that you probably don't really think about. Maya is expensive, your electric bill is expensive. All of those things need to be folded into, man, I need $22 or else I might as well not take that job because I'm going to be losing money. Once you have that cost basis, then what you need to do is start thinking about how much is this actually worth to the client. That's super hard because nobody knows. The client probably doesn't even really know. But it also varies with every client, and that's where your due diligence has to come in. So you need to go through and research and understand how much they value what you're going to do, how much money do they have, what's their scenario, what's their ultimate goal, and then you work with them to try to figure out the right way to maximize their budget versus the value you're adding. I know that one's complicated. I have a bunch of tips. I've talked a lot, so I want to throw it over probably to Kim.
Why me?
Because you're death staring me right now.
That's just my face. I think it changes. You know, I think what you said is totally accurate. Like, you have to be able to live. So I think knowing what you need is super duper important. But especially like early on in career, you know, building work that you're really proud of. You know, I do a lot, or especially when I was very early on, like how much control do I have? You know, like how proud am I going to be of this work? And how much is this going to be work that travels with me throughout my career as something that I can point back to and be really proud of? You know, some of the most lucrative projects I've worked on are also things that I'm not really proud of necessarily that I'm going to show. So, you know, there's always concessions, right? And I think it's important when you're starting out to like really feel in your soul, like these concessions make sense for me. You know, I do a lot of work with nonprofits, and like when you work with nonprofits, it's like this is a skill that needs to make sense for them. But there's a huge difference between like a small local community nonprofit or like a large national nonprofit. So everything kind of has this fluctuating number for me.
I mean, I'm in a kind of a dual situation. So I'm in a union, a camera union, so they dictate rates sometimes. And so depending on your tier within the union, so I'm a camera operator in the camera guild, and but then I'm also a specialist in that I do underwater. So a lot of times I get calls and they'll say, well, we're only paying tier 1 or whatever, and I usually go, I don't even know what that means, but this is what I get. And they're like, oh, and because I'm usually way more. Because I'm a specialist, I've taken years of my life to become a specialist, to be really good at what I do. I work underwater. Not many people do that. And so I expect to be paid, you know, higher than somebody who's just standing at a tripod, and no offense, but, you know, we're doing something a little bit different. And then in Kim's case, I also do a lot of wildlife stuff, and many of those organizations are nonprofits, marine conservation. So I usually ask them what their budget is, and they will tell me, and I'll decide in my mind if I could do that, you know. And if it's a good organization, I really like what they're doing, I might be willing to, you know, I'll cut my rate because I like it and I want to do it, or it's a very unique opportunity, so I'll take it. Like I did a job where they said, well, we don't have a lot to pay you, but we're going to go to like 5 different countries around the world. Do you think you'd like to do that? And I'm like, yeah, sign me up, you know. So I think you have to, like Key said, you know your value and know what you're worth, and then work from there, and then decide, you know, is this something I really want to do? Is it worth doing? Or am I just doing it to, you know, put bread on the table?
Can we also mention that Tom Boyd swims with sharks, and that
Probably worth
warrants
a little more.
bit of an extra pay?
Hazard pay.
Yeah, right. For me, in my world, a lot of times when I'm negotiating rates, same thing. We're taking all those things into consideration. You definitely need to know your numbers going into it. That is the strongest leveraging arm that you have, knowing how much you have in it, how much you need to make out of it. But I usually have a range that I go with. Some people don't like it. It's this and that's it. And just for numbers, my range may be say it's a weekly rate, it may range, you know, $200, $300, $400 in range there. Day rates are different. That's also, you have to understand the structure of how your pay is going to be. Are you on a weekly rate? Are you bidding for it by a project? Are you bidding this just for a one day deal, or a day rate where it's 3 days and it's 3-day rates? So you have to understand all the spectrum of what you have. The information is key, and information is the biggest leveraging arm you can have in going into negotiation. Now, back to it's a matter of what do you think you're worth and what do they think you're worth is also where to be added to that. Your worth actually grows in repeat customers. So that is also very helpful to you.
I'll just kind of add to what everybody else is saying. For me, I think, especially for those of you that are just starting out, you really need to know where the value is for you in all of those jobs. So if you're getting a decent day rate and you're able to pay your bills with that, that's great value for you, especially for somebody starting out. Most likely, that's not going to be the case. You're going to get offered way lower rates because you are just starting out due to your lack of experience. So the value for you, somebody starting out, is to shake hands with everybody that you meet when you go into the field and build connections, because the people you're meeting on those first set of jobs you're going on are probably going to get you the next set of jobs, and that's how you're going to start to build your client base and build a reputation. So just understanding before you say yes, if you're not making the kind of money you'd like to be making, then you need to make sure that there is some type of value for you. And I feel if you're just starting out, the value is the experience. The value is the people that you're meeting. And as you gain experience, your rates will go up because the value in meeting these people goes down because now you've got the experience to back you up and to back up those rates. One of the things that I do, which I just did maybe about 3 weeks ago, I contacted all the freelancers in my market and I asked them what their rates were. And then I added $150, $200 to my rate because I want to be more expensive than everybody in town. And that's how, I keep current, is I just talk to other freelancers that do basically the same type of work that I do, and then I charge more.
I think it's worth taking a slight step back as well. Like, what we're actually talking about here is a really human conversation. Rate discussions are a part of the conversation of how do two people work together. And the person that you're having the conversation with, they're probably looking at a lot of different moving pieces in their max budget, trying to reach for some sort of dream or goal, and they're asking for your help. And so you can approach that conversation like two people, I use this analogy, like I use this visual image in my mind of two people sitting on opposite sides of the table butting heads. It's not going to go well. Or you can approach the conversation understanding that they're trying to reach for something bigger than themselves as well, and find a way to make them feel like you're sitting next to them working towards that same common goal. And that can usually just be a matter of asking, how much is your budget? Like, I want to work with you, I want to help you, I don't really know what your budget is, and I want to make sure that I'm able to be successful for myself, but also that I can help you achieve your goal. Saying something like that, man, you're on the same side, you guys are a team now, and you're going to work together to solve the project, but also they're going to feel a little bit indebted to try to take care of you. And so when the actual numbers portion of that conversation comes up, if you've done a good job in the relationship prior to that conversation or to that moment in the conversation, you're already working together and it's not a fight. It's about how do we solve this mutual problem together. And that really should be what you're striving for.
Okay, that's great advice and information. One of the things that was briefly mentioned, Keith, you mentioned it, was taxes. The tax man cometh, whether you want it to happen or not. I know my first experience was a disaster because I was not remembering the tax man coming. So what's your thoughts and how would you give advice to them about the tax man and how to deal with that?
I suppose first, just to really clearly state this, if you guys are working as employees somewhere in a W-2, taxes are automatically taken out. You don't think about it. Most of our industry doesn't work as employees on W-2s. We work on contracts. There's no taxes taken out. And so when tax time comes, you'd better have saved some of that money and not just spent it all. I'd say, I don't know, a third of graduates, when they graduate, they end up owing the IRS a lot of money that they're not prepared for. So hear that lesson.
Yeah, definitely put it aside. Because you're mostly, if freelance, you're on 1099s, and it's just what you made, and that's it. Nothing's taken out. Other thing I do is I keep a diary of all my expenses. I keep receipts, every receipt that's involved with the job. If I'm driving to client meetings or to studios or wherever, I keep an odometer reading for the day. So I'll have a start odometer and then the end. So at the end of the year, because you can take, mileage rate, they have a mileage rate, or if you lease a car and then you lease it under your own business, if that's the case, or, you might be able to take some of those lease payments. I don't recommend leasing though, but that's, up to you guys. Yeah, just keep receipts of everything. And then, kind of come up with a filing system. I keep everything and I note on the receipt if I had lunch with a client or I had or met with my AC and we're talking about the job, then I note that on there and what we did, and everything that receipt is related to the job, because when you get audited, and I've been audited 5 times, and they will look at everything and they'll go, what is that? And you're sitting there trying to rack your brain out what you did and why you have that receipt. It's right there when you write it down. At the end of the day, I come home, the first thing I do is I just make all these notations on my receipt, so that if that auditor comes after you, you say, well, I met with Keith and we were talking about this job or that job. And that way they go, oh, okay, that's a valid.
Tom, you can always tell the IRS that we met, okay?
Yeah, okay, yeah.
I think it's really important too. A lot of times we're, as creatives, at least in my experience, we hire other people. And it's important that you're also, when it comes to tax time, like if you're making, you're hiring a couple of your friends, you're still accountable for the top number. So unless you have an accountant that's, really managing your books and making sure that you're 1099ing the other people, your taxable number is the top number, not the number of that number and then the people that you paid out. That was a lesson that I learned the hard way before I incorporated. It's not super expensive to become an S Corp. It's totally worth it if you think you're going to be consulting long term or on and off for a long period of time. It's a little bit of a learning curve to file taxes as a business and as a person, but it is something that will protect you from a lot of different scenarios where you may have made more money but also put out more money than you expected to different people and things like that. It's worth it to find a good accountant, somebody who's going to work with you long term, a CPA who's going to help you with taxes. I always feel like, oh my God, this is so expensive to have this accountant. But then every March, April, I'm like, oh my God, I'm so happy I have this accountant. I made a really big shift about 10 years ago. And I was always like, a 1099 employee. And then even as an incorporated person, I just kind of had like this big pool of money, right? And then I kind of like worked off of that. And I became a W-2 employee of my own company. So now I'm on my own payroll. I have a very modest salary. And I don't think about the top number until the end of the year. And then I'm able to give myself a bonus. So there's like worker me and then like owner me. And owner me only takes, profits at the end of the year when we see how we finally did, instead of trying to manage that on the fly all the time. And for me, that's been like hugely helpful because I have like a weird artist mind. So it's much easier for me to like budget my modest W-2 salary and then all to be like, oh my God, March, look at me, I got a prize. And that works really well.
One thing about the whole taxes in general, I mean, Kim has said, hiring someone may seem expensive. Doing your taxes wrong and being dinged for things you did wrong is really expensive. And if you just don't want to deal with it all and not pay any of your taxes, that's super expensive. So my other advice is you are your own business. And you have to be responsible as if your work is your own business, which means you have to carve out time for finances and to balance a budget and to do profit and loss statements. That's all part of being a business owner. Even though you may not think of yourself as a business owner, you are, and you have to have that mindset. Now, if you're into W-2 work, like I said, that whole thing is a whole lot easier to deal with. Again, there's definite advantages in both ways of being paid.
And just from a number standpoint too, I mean, my rule of thumb, I'd rather be like happily surprised than devastatingly giving the government money. I think of it as 50% of any project is just going to be taxes and nonsense. And when I say nonsense, I mean like gas and food and software and, like all the other administrative things that aren't actually money in my pocket paying for me to do all of my colorful life.
Yeah, that's
and it seems really high, but depending on where you are in the universe, like that's actually pretty close to the taxable number. I love that you guys are nodding. That makes me feel really
I do
good.
40%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like to have a prize. It makes me feel better about my taxes and paying an accountant to be like, oh, I saved 50%, and then in March it's like, oh, is there a bonus? I got a bonus. Right. Like,
Another thing to take into consideration too is if you're a freelancer, you're responsible for everything. Nobody's paying for your health insurance. Nobody's saving money for your retirement. That's all on you, and it's a good thing, right? Because you're in control of all of those things rather than putting all of that stuff in the hands of somebody else that doesn't really care about you. So there is a little bit more work and thought that has to go into it, but ultimately it's for your benefit in the long run. But that's also part of those costs, right? When you're figuring out your day rates, all of those bills need to get paid at the end of the month. So that's also something to consider.
Yeah, and also just remember too, if you're doing 1099 and you're freelancing, you're also going to be responsible for quarterly taxes. So you need to kind of take what you're making and figure out if this is going to happen all year, then you kind of come up with a tax number so that you can pay a quarterly amount. Because at the end of the year, if you don't pay enough of that over the year, you can get penalized as well. So you have to be careful that you're at least, you don't wait until December 31st. Do it quarterly. So, because I think it's, as I recall, you had to pay like 3/4 of the previous year's tax liability to the government.
So did you say you were audited 4 times?
Yeah.
And you worked for the IRS?
I did.
It actually gets a little bit worse than that. Just to further stress all of you guys really quick. Depending on where you live, you're going to owe federal, state, and city taxes.
Right.
And the city taxes are the most wonky and off-dated and like weird forms everywhere. So Los Angeles, for example, if you live in Los Angeles County and you're doing freelance work seated in Los Angeles County, you have to file by February 28th a form stating how much you made. And if you made less than $400,000, you don't owe any taxes on it as long as you file by the end of February 28th. If you miss that deadline, you owe taxes on it. And every city has slightly different obligations like that. So if you want a single rule of thumb here, if you guys find yourselves going down a career path where you're going to be working on contracts, the very first thing you should do is go find a CPA. Find a slightly shady CPA and you're going to save so much money. And like they're going to pay for themselves tenfold and you're going to be astounded, but they're also going to be your friend and helping you, telling you like, hey, go pay your freaking LA taxes.
I can give an example to that. We did our taxes on TurboTax. Free, it was easy to go, and was getting into the position where we're doing more and more 1099 work. So decided, like, let's get a CPA and just see what happens. And he came back and said, all your deductions are fine, but for some reason where you're doing mixed W-2 and 1099, TurboTax put all your deductions on a different form and not this form. So, and that was, he went previous. So then he says, I'm going to redo your taxes for last year, we'll do amendment, and you're going to get about $2,500 back. So I was doing all the taxes. I was putting it all, keeping it all, but it went on the wrong form. And at that moment, that gentleman just won my business for being my accountant because $2,500 paid him forward for a few years. I mean, yeah, it's well worth it.
Yeah, he probably cost a lot less than $20,000.
Absolutely.
Just to double down on Kim's rule of thumb as well, because I do want you guys to have some like tangible takeaways here. Depending on, again, where you live, which state, which city, your tax rates are going to vary. Federally, you're going to have your income tax, but also self-employment tax. Self-employment tax, I think, is 15% right now. And so that like 30 to 50% rule of thumb is going to go to taxes. That's a pretty darn good rule of thumb. If you have a good CPA, they're going to bring all that down with all your itemized deductions. I work in games. I get to write off all of my computer hardware, every video game I play, my electricity, my internet, on and on and on and on. And so like those chip away at the total taxes that I owe. Probably aren't going to do that very well if you don't have that CPA.
Yeah, and like I use a totally separate banking system for everything that's business. I like to live kind of like a child. So like whatever I can do to segment my work life and my personal life, I love. So like I have a credit card that is like all work. So I don't have to look through it and be like, was this a work thing? No, it's on that card, it's work. And I hold myself to that standard with like extreme scrutiny because it makes all of that stuff easier. I hate having to like look through and find that stuff out. And it took me a long time to get there and to really do it. And there's some mistakes here and there. But it really does save you. And like a good bookkeeper, a good accountant, like there's not a reason not to, you know what I mean? And all of us work in services that they may need, you know, like they may need a website, they may need a logo, they may need a promo video, they may want to do a podcast. So, you know, there's always ways to have that conversation. If you feel like the startup money for it isn't there for you, reach out to them. You know, there's young accountants that are just starting out too. And if they're going to be with you on your journey and you're going to grow, then they're also going to see that as something that they want to do.
Going to drive down a little different road. You mentioned unions, the point of joining them as freelance artists. What has been your experience with union and involvement?
Pure envy.
So I do about 50% of the work that I do these days is union work. The other half is non-union work. I joined the union really because I wanted to be considered for larger projects that were rolling through my town. And that's I think the idea of unions are great. I don't think practically unions are great. So, so for me, it was more. I just felt like if I wanted to be considered for certain things I was being passed up on because I wasn't a union member, so I joined. You know, on the plus side, these unions, on a union job, you know, they take the entire budget of the project into consideration, and that's how they figure out how much all of the technicians' minimum wages are going to be. So like Tom was saying, everything is tiered. Those rates that they establish are the minimum required rates. So if a client calls me and they tell me they're working on and I'm with you, I don't know what the different tiers even mean, really, other than the size of the budget. But if somebody calls me and says, I have a tier 1 shoot, this is the rate, and if it's less than I ask for, then I just tell them, well, this is the rate that I'm asking for. And if they can pay it, great. If they can't pay it, then we have a compromise, or I suggest that they call somebody else that, you know, might want to work for less.
I mean, I agree with everything Fernando says. I got into the union mainly because I wanted to, at the time, I didn't want to be missing out on any opportunity. So like if you want to work features or commercials or television shows, you needed to be in the union. And then some of the other advantages of being in the union is if you like get on a television series or a long feature film or something like that, you earn hours which gets banked, and then that goes into your health and welfare. It'll go into you having health insurance. It'll go into a retirement account. If you do like 20 years and you always achieve that bank during the year, because you have to make it in certain time periods, it's like twice a year, you have to make what we would call your bank. And if you make those and you do that for 20 years, you're going to get a pension. And hopefully you're doing more than just that, because I don't think the pension is usually enough these days. But you also will get your health insurance. So if God forbid anything happens to you, otherwise as a freelancer, you're going to be responsible for your own medical and dental and anything else that's health related. And that can be very, very expensive. So when you're in a union, you're at least in basically a group insurance. So it's a little bit less. And so those are the benefits of the union.
See, I would say the downside to all of that all sounds great, but when times are lean, like right now, the TV business is really, really slow.
Yes.
I know a lot of people that have been relying on the union
Yeah.
insurance.
And they're losing it.
And they're losing it because
Yeah.
they're not getting the hours.
Yeah.
And, you know, part of me feels for them. But on the other hand, like I said before, we're freelancers, and it's our responsibility to set ourselves up. So if you're
Yeah.
putting yourself in a position where you're going to lose something because you're not
Exactly
handling
right,
your
yeah.
business, I personally have a hard time feeling sorry for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's your responsibility to
Yeah.
you know,
Especially all those people that, you went to and you said, I need some work because I need to get my bank. And they're like, yeah, we will, don't worry about it. Now they're coming to me and they go, I need some hours. I'm like, well, sorry.
If you're not familiar with it, there is a freelancers union. It's really lovely. It has been around for 30-something years. It's based out of New York. It was really helpful for me as an early consultant and freelancer, in my 20s, to just learn about how to do contracts the right way, where to find resources. It's a really great place to look for different resources in different cities and things like that, and a great resource for networking online with other freelancers, finding out about rates and things like that. The Graphic Artists Guild for the type of design work that I do is really great. And really just to find out and get validated information. Reddit's not going to be the best place to find this kind of stuff. You want to find some kind of guild or organization that you can really validate and credentialize. Even if you don't join, there's a lot of information, and they're very open with sharing that, because if you join, great, but if you don't, also, the tide raises all ships.
How do we find out more about the Freelancers Union?
Freelancersunion.org, I think, is the website. I'm not in it or affiliated, but it is.
At least Google that.
Yeah, it's super helpful. It was really helpful early on in my 20s. Yeah.
I will add to everything they said. I'm a union member as well. I do both freelance work and union work. Great advantages there. Also, another advantage your unions have is a lot of times they offer training for things that are free to you as a union member. So that's another thing to take advantage of. So there's a lot of benefits into being a union member.
Also, they're great for like your welfare on the set. They're great for safety. They make sure the productions are safe. They protect you even for your rates. Like I've had jobs where producers have refused to pay, and you just go to the union and you say, XYZ Productions not paying me, and they're not paying anybody else, and they'll just go right after them, and so you have like a somebody that's there to watch your back.
That is, and it's fun to watch. I did a movie about 2 years ago, and the electricians, I think what ended up happening is the production was trying to save or maybe not pay into the pension for the union, so they put everybody as an electrician down as a PA on the paperwork. And so when the first round of checks came out, going into the second week of the movie, we all came in one day and there was no power. And then call time passed and there was still no power, and everybody's just kind of looking around and the whole building is dark. And they just told us, sit tight, sit tight. And there were a whole bunch of, guys in show blacks, like really big dudes outside talking to the executives. And man, they were sweating bullets all day. And we ended up not shooting anything until after lunch. It was awesome. It was awesome. We called that, it was a dumpster. It was a dumpster fire. When the people in the art department put the logo, the movie was called Absolute Dominion. It hasn't been released. I don't know that it ever will be. But the art department did logos of the movie, and it said dumpster fire Las Vegas. It was awesome. Yeah.
Insurance has come up several times, and it's expensive.
Oof.
It really is, yeah. To get personal health insurance and dental and anything else you might need, especially all of us with glass needs. What's been your experience? How have you overcome it? Obviously, union's helpful. You mentioned that already, but in your own lives, before you were able to get to the union or make the hours in the union, what was your...
I've always carried my own personal insurance. Even when I have qualified for the hours, I don't want to deal with the stress of starting and stopping my own policy, so I've just always kept our policies going. It all goes through my company. And that's just one of the costs that I always factor in to, what I need to earn every year. And same thing for retirement. All of that stuff I've got set up. So regardless of how many union days I do, if I have union insurance for a little while, great. But I don't think I've actually used it yet because I've always had my own personal insurance.
Oh, I hate this subject so much.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's I every year have to figure out insurance for all of my employees, and it's going up, I think 17 to 22% year over year, and it's just like an absolute nightmare through and through. Every state is a little bit different, so how we even shop for insurance is going to vary by state, which is an absolute nightmare. Within that, shopping for personal insurance versus group plan insurance versus small business insurance, there are like all these different strategies. There are brokers out there. There are recruiters out, like there's services basically where you go, you don't pay them anything because they'll get money from the insurance companies and they're going to help you navigate all this. I super recommend working with them because they're going to work with you to figure out the best approach, and it is such an amazing minefield. Recent years, like as of COVID, there's a lot of group health plans that are opening up legally. There's things called PEOs, payroll employment officer. I don't remember what the O is in that. But it lets you basically, so as opposed to you going out and shopping for your own insurance, you get to be a part of this group plan that has 5,000 other people in it. And all of a sudden you're getting massive discounts because it's negotiated down in price. So there's a lot of different axes to it. It is a wildly complicated, wildly confusing, and wildly miserable subject.
I have
important.
some friends that are actually starting to drop the insurance and just do pay retainers
Even-
for doctors
Yeah.
that are no longer taking insurance.
Yeah, even the medical industry
Yeah,
is now
my-
turning over.
My
especially
brother
that.
has been doing that the last few years.
That's Amazon's like one medical system too, right?
I'm not sure.
I think Amazon's getting into hospitals because of this.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's like a yearly fee, I think, and everything he needs is covered.
For the longest time, I didn't have any insurance other than dive insurance. So I used to tell people, if anything happens to me, just put a mask on my face and throw me in a pool, or drive me to the ocean, throw me in, because then it would cover me. So that's what I used to tell people, until eventually I was able to have my own insurance. And I went through like some of these organizations were like self-employed organizations where I could get my own. And then when I got married, then luckily my wife had insurance, so I just went over onto hers. So.
Insurance is really funny because you've got health insurance and you've got disability insurance, long-term, short-term. Read that stuff. You know, I had a real big wake-up call paying into disability insurance, and had the unlucky fortune to then need to elect it and use it, and I got denied. And it really was an eye-opener about what does and doesn't qualify. I mean, y'all are pretty young, so like hopefully you're not learning that stuff too soon. But I work with a broker. Also, being incorporated and being insured through my business is wildly better and different than using the marketplace. The plans that are available to you as a business are wildly better and different than the marketplace. Working with a broker that you trust, it's a really great thing, and they're out there. They're looking to network. They're looking to meet people. I have really phenomenal insurance, and I'm really lucky because I have had some really intense surgeries and have to take time off and things like that. So it's really important to me to know what my max benefit is going to be. Like, I never consider my monthly payment. I max out every year. So it's like, you know, what is the damage going to look like? And then I have to budget for it. And then my rates have to reflect it, and that kind of stuff. Don't be shy about talking to people about it. It's not pleasant, but it's real, you know, and it's something that you're going to have to deal with. And it's better to have a little bit of information and a little bit of a plan. It's something to really talk with folks that are a little older, that are in whatever industry you're in. You know, depending on, you know, state to state, it's super different. What's available to you depending on where you're freelancing is very different. That's one of the big things with the Freelancers Union. They have unionized insurance. If I was in a different health situation, I would probably use theirs because it's great insurance and it's super affordable. But everybody, for me, like, my case is super specific, and I want super specific doctors and that kind of stuff. So yeah, don't be shy and be like, oh, is this a weird thing to talk to somebody about? Like this is one of my favorite artists or one of my favorite designers. I want to talk about work, but like also like I want to talk about medical stuff.
Are you insured?
Like, yeah, like, and I think too, like, when you have people of a certain kind of age too, like, it's not weird. Like, my friends and I talk about insurance, you know what I mean? Like, I have a lot of friends that were only able to have children because of the nationalized ability to do open insurance on the marketplace. Like, a lot of freelance designers that opened up the ability to have children, which is a really big deal. But you couldn't get coverage for cancer, for pregnancy, for all of these like higher cost things until we had the marketplace. And that's something that like most freelancers that are in their like 30s, 40s, 50s, like, we've all been through a lot of changes in that world, and like, you may not want to talk about it as much as we do. So like opening up that conversation, like, it's weird and like might be a little TMI, depending. Maybe you ask me, it'll probably be TMI. But yeah, it's not a weird conversation at all. Like, my friends and I talk about health coverage and insurance like all of these kind of stuffy topics are topics we talk about all the time. And you also have to think about, as a freelancer, the time that you're looking for insurance and shopping for insurance is also part of your time, right? Like, and just to kind of like tie this back into like the whole conversation about rates, I always consider like 1 hour of me sitting at my desk is 4 hours of my actual time. So I have to think about that because there's the time of like sending emails, of coordinating administrative work, of doing my health insurance, of working with my accountant. All of that stuff has to combine into when I'm actually like doing the fun stuff. I can't just charge for the fun stuff because I'm going to take a loss. I'm going to make like $2.50 an hour or something ridiculous like that. So it's important that you're thinking holistically about like your total time. It's not just the clock time at the desk.
One more topic that builds into the idea of rates, and that is probably something that's not on people's minds at this stage. I know it wasn't when I was that age, many, many, many years ago. 401k and retirement, and putting that money aside now because it is, so adding that into the rate topic as well, and what's been your method and how early did you start?
Well, if you don't know much about retirement, you should just Google search compounding interest and how that works. The earlier you start, the better it is. Definitely that is part of your formula when you're figuring in expenses. Things happen. The great thing about insurance is it's best to be as diligent as you can. It is very easy to, if you're a freelancer and it's some really slow times, it's an expense that you can pull back. And then when you have really great times, you can add back to that. So it's a flexible expense. I would love to speak about the rewards of having 401k, but I have not gotten there yet. So, but basically, you want to save because your body, your knees, your back, they all have a shelf life. You can't work the type of work you do for your entire life. Was on the road for 27 years. I'm now transitioning to come off of the road. I can still keep up with the same work. It's the recovery time it's a little bit longer, but you have to plan for that. You're not going to be in your prime, and you want to save. You want all these fantastic experiences you've had in your life. You want to reward yourself, and I mean, when you do retire and get to that age, you've lived a great life and a great career doing awesome things, building games. I mean, art, sound. I mean, Tom swims with sharks still when he retires. I've traveled the world at someone else's expense. It's been fantastic, but I want to eventually do some of that stuff for me. And you want to have a nest egg available to do that. So it's really kind of hard, I think, to visualize currently and think ahead because your work life is going to be probably 40 years plus. It's hard to think that far ahead of what that's going to be. So definitely start visualizing it now. Start studying on it. There's a lot of different approaches to retirement. 401k is one of them. Roth IRAs. Again, this is for me personally. I push back to someone who knows this world really well, because your strategy changes in investing. Right now, you're not going to need that money for quite a while, but when you're getting close to, I'm 1 or 2 years away, maybe I don't want my money in such a volatile market. Maybe I want to move that around. And also, your pay is going to be increasing as you leave here. So you will have more to offer, more to give. You may have a business, which a business can now do some of that stuff for you. It's a big topic. Again, don't be afraid to pull someone in that knows this area really well.
So I just want to tell you a quick story. This is what actually got me really serious about retirement. I've been freelance pretty much since I was about 21 years old, and some of the like the big dogs that I first met that were my mentors, these guys were very, very well established when I first met them. Fast forward, 20 years, these guys are now in their 70s. And so a couple years ago, I was working a hockey game, and I was working on the home show. My buddy Joe, who was like 72 years old at the time, was working on the away show. And we're moving big, heavy cables, and I walked past him at one point, and I could tell he was exhausted. I really wanted to stop doing what I was doing and just jump in and give him a hand, but I had my own show to build, right? We were working for two different clients just on the same event. He went home that night and had a stroke, and he died 2 days later. His kids had to take out a GoFundMe for all of his final expenses. Joe was a beast. He had an amazing career. He worked on the biggest shows. He didn't save any of it. And he left his family in a really, really, really tough situation. And I was so embarrassed for him. Even though he was gone and he couldn't be embarrassed anymore, I was so embarrassed for him because the last thing that all of us as a community heard about him was, can you please help us bury him? And I thought it was tragic. I called my brother, who also does sound for a living, and I was like, dude, we can't mess around with this. We have to get serious about this, because if we don't start now, we're gonna end up like Joe. And I don't ever want to end up like Joe. I don't want to have to work beyond my prime. I want to only work if I want it to be a choice. I don't want it to have a need. And so since then, we've really been working very hard at building up our nest egg so that I can start to reel back on some of those harder jobs when I get, past my prime, if I haven't already past my prime. But that was a big motivator, and sadly, that is a really, really common tale in the television business. There's a lot of people that just didn't think about what was going to happen when they got older, and they pissed away all this wonderful money that they were making once they got established. And I have a lot of friends that have died in hotels because they're on the road working because they have to be.
Yeah, it's so common. I think the end of life expense thing, it's so grim, but it's unfortunately super duper common. A quick couple of things. I had this really great, kind of like CPA planner, kind of like coach kind of guy, really early in my 20s, when I all of a sudden was like, making more money than my parents, who worked in like the service industry. I'm the first college graduate in my family, and I was like, what do I do with the 401k? And my mom was like, I don't know, cash it out, spend it. She said, throw a party. She's like, cash it out, throw a party. It's like, I think I need help. So I would meet with this guy, and it was one of my favorite things. He would say, you need to close your eyes and envision serving yourself dinner when you're in your 70s. And think about what is old lady Kim eating for dinner? Is she eating like lean cuisine from the microwave, or is she eating like sushi? Because the cost of today's lean cuisine becomes tomorrow's sushi dinner if you just put lean cuisine money in the bank. And it wasn't a ton. Like, I started out like really like, $20 a month, like not a ton of money into my 401k. And, that compound interest, looking at that chart is so eye-opening. If you've never seen it before, saving from 20 to 30 is more impactful than saving from 30 to 60. That's how compound interest works. Starting early is everything. And a couple of things about a 401k specifically that I think a lot of people maybe don't know, or they don't tell you right away, is you actually can use that money depending on where you're at in life. If you're buying a new house, you're allowed to take that money out for a down payment for your house with no penalty. If you're in a medical situation and you need that money, it's not like it's locked away forever. Like, I had all these ideas of like, it's locked away forever, you're never allowed to touch it. There was also an act that got passed in 2020 to allow you to use that money to live. And for me, I had like hundreds of thousands of dollars of work canceled because of the pandemic. And had I not saved that money in my 20s, I literally would not have been able to afford my mortgage in my 40s. It was so impactful. And it's one of those things too, like, there's IRAs, there's this, like, there's crypto, don't do it. I mean, maybe do it a little, but don't bank on it. We can talk about that off camera. And like, incorporating allows you access to a 401k. So it's one of those things, if you go forward with doing an S corp, like, you don't need an LLC if you're the single proprietor, so you don't have to pay the fees of an LLC. It's a huge misconception about liability and, incorporating, but you have access. Like, I use 401k in a box. Like, it's an online service. It costs $200, and it allows me to have all of the benefits of like a multi, $1 million business to put money away into my 401k. and to have access to do that in a way that is protecting me and also saving for me. So yeah, don't be shy about that stuff. Even like just meet like with somebody in your neighborhood bank. You don't even need to open an account. Like those people are just sitting there doing nothing, hoping that you come in and ask them questions because that's all that they know about. Sit down with them, just be like, I'm curious, and just get literate, get educated. Like that's my biggest thing about all of this stuff is like just start getting literate and getting educated. There's a lot of people with a lot of ideas. We're people that have ideas. There's no right way. There's no silver bullet. Especially if you're like the first college graduate in your family, you're the first person to be in more of like a white collar situation, like start gathering information from different sources and figure out what feels right and really trust your gut about what feels right. I'm not a retirement person. I'm going to work till my last breath, but that doesn't mean that I don't want to have the benefit of slowing down, you know, of being able to be pickier and choosier. You know, when I'm 70, I don't want to be like mixing crappy video with crappy bands. Like I want to be able to really just do what I love, you know, like it's important to set yourself up for what you want your life to look like. Nobody else's framework is necessarily going to be perfect for you.
And this is fast, I promise, but I really want to beat this in to you guys, actually. All of you in the audience right now, because of compounding interest, have a far more likely future of retiring as millionaires than we do, if you
Facts.
use it.
Facts.
Yep.
Yeah,
That's very true.
for sure.
That's very true. We do have opportunity for a question or two. I don't know if there's.
Hey there.
What up, online?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. Hey. So there's a lot of questions, and I'm sure there's a lot of questions here. So I think one of the ones that will apply to most people is, so with companies like scammers, like on Upwork and Fiverr, people have really had some bad experiences. How do you weed out those companies that may not be on the up and up?
I don't use them.
Me too.
Pretty easy way to weed them out.
Yeah, I don't use them. I'm not on them. I'm not interested in that. You know, like participating in bottom feeding means eating at the bottom. So I just don't I don't consider that like real. You know what I mean? Like I don't eat dinner at the gas station. I don't think that's a restaurant.
But if you're a new grad and you may not have the opportunities as those of you on the panel, what do you suggest
Well,
then?
I mean, diversify yourself. I mean, yeah, try that a little bit, but don't put all your eggs into Fiverr. I mean, again, it's a good place to start, but that's not your only thing.
I don't even think it's a good place to start. I honestly think like you're in the world. Like don't be scared to go be in the world. Wherever you are, whatever city you're in, like do you love dogs? Go to the local pet store. Go to the person who's a dog washer. Just be like, this is what I do. This is what I want to do. Like make your own network. You know, like the only thing stopping you from that job is opening up the conversation and participating in an online pool where like you're competing with people who have, you know, 20 more years of experience who are based in the Philippines who don't need to make more than $5 a day. Like it's such an incredible, like strange time with that kind of like online marketplace. I feel like participating in that conversation, like that's not, I don't think that that's the way forward. I really don't.
I like your answer. You sold me. Not a good place to start.
Sorry.
I would just say, you know, you just need to find the community. Your community exists. You just have to find those people, and the like Kim said, you just have to tell everybody what it is. You know, everybody that you meet should know what it is that you do, because you never know when somebody is going to need that. Oh, I just met somebody that does exactly what you do. You know, so that's how you want to be networking. You don't want to put a profile up on a website and then just hope that somebody picks you. Like that's not a good way to get work.
I think it's really worth it if you're freelancing, if you're trying to build a freelance career. One of the most important skills that you can build is understanding your sales funnel. And what I mean by that is like place yourself in your client's perspective and ask, where am I going to go to find high quality work that I want to provide? If you're chasing clients in Fiverr, like the people that go to Fiverr are prepared to spend $5. Like you are feeding from the bottom of the barrel. Like you guys are college graduates from a fantastic art school. You should be trying to find clients that want quality and know that they need to pay for it. That's what you should be doing.
Yeah, you're better off advertising yourself to your personal network on Facebook, on TikTok, on Instagram, on LinkedIn than being on like a Fiverr or like a network, Upwork, some like those predatory websites that are really just about the bottom line and are really set up to just make money off of you and your participation. You know, like it's such an illusion of this kind of like new snake oil world of hustle culture. And I feel like the more that we normalize that as a thing that we're doing, we're feeding into this predatory machine that exists. When like, you know, if you're into some like super, like if you're like super into like My Little Ponies and you're an audio engineer, like get on those Reddit threads and just be like, this is what I love. This is who I am. Raise your hand. This is what I love. This is what I do. If you're sitting around, like I put up my profile waiting for the phone to ring, like you're gonna be waiting forever. Like that's not a thing.
Great answers. Thank you.
Do you have one more?
Yeah, we do. Actually, I have one from Grant Schonkweiler.
Oh my God, one
No,
of the ultimate freelancers.
So he wanted to know, if you're solo, how do you decide to organize your company? LLC, sole proprietorship, S Corp? I know it's very specific.
I'm S Corp, ride or die all day. I was told very early on, if you don't have partners, the cost of an LLC makes no sense for you. And all of the research and
depends on
people
the
I've
state.
talked to, like, pardon?
That depends on the state.
It depends on the state. Yeah, I'm like totally in the bubble of Illinois beauty. So like everything for me is just kind of like in the, you know, the rainbow beautiful life.
For me, it was my CPA. It was all based on the advice of my CPA. She set everything up for me. I just signed on the dotted line to make it all work.
My logic here is register a business. That's the choice that you need to make. Go find a CPA and ask them what type.
Right.
It varies by state, it varies by your scenario. I currently run an S Corp and an LLC. I have a California S Corp and a Washington LLC. They're both better for their respective scenarios. It's the point is registering the business, and what that does is it protects you as an individual from being able to get sued for a mishap with the business.
Also, Grant, you know the answer to that question, you sly dog.
Well, I'm going to thank you very much for your sharing your knowledge. Thank you guys for coming out. Please thank our guests, yes?